Hi, my name's Shona, and this story happened to me only a few months ago. I have never been so terrified in all my life. What started as a bid for freedom turned into a nightmare. It all started when my dad split up with Mom, and we went from living in a really cool area to a not-so-fashionable suburb, and that was just the start of it. To make things worse, I had to change schools and leave all my friends behind. I've never felt so miserable in my whole life. Looking back, I suppose it sounds so selfish, but I was angry that things had to change. It was at that point that I decided to run away. I was almost 17 and felt that I could make my own way in the world. I would go to New York and find a job. Everything would be so easy, or so I thought. How naive could I be? Once I was settled, I would let my mom know, and maybe I could even help her out a little. I guessed that just not having me at home would lessen the burden on her and my younger brother. Anyway, I left a note, packed my rucksack, and traveled the 80 miles or so from Philadelphia to New York by bus. I still had some savings left over from my birthday and Christmas to pay for the travel and a few nights in a hostel. I was so sure that I would be able to sort it out myself in a few days. Now, I'd been to New York in the past with my mom and dad, but never on my own. I spent the entire journey dreaming of my life in the Big Apple, the place I would live, the people I would meet, the parties I would go to, but that all faded as soon as I stepped out of the bus. The city was a lot busier and noisier than I remembered. I had the address of a cheap hostel and set off to find it. It hadn't seemed far from the bus station on the map, but carrying my heavy rucksack through the busy streets, it seemed like miles. People rushed by in such a hurry and no one seemed friendly or smiled, just caught up in their own little world. Not like at home, where at least people had the time to say hello. My heart was already sinking when I finally arrived at the hostel, only to be told by a fierce-looking receptionist that they were fully booked and had no rooms for the night, or the following night, that I should have booked earlier. Something I hadn't even thought of. At that moment, I felt like crying, like a kid far from home. Which, in fact, was precisely what I was. It was then that I met Mike. I know that Mom and Dad had always told me not to talk to strangers, but, everyone was strange to me in New York. I figured that if I was going to live here, then I had to start making friends. Anyway, Mike looked like a nice guy, clean-cut and well-spoken, not some down-and-out tramp walking the streets. I guessed that he was in his mid to late 30s and looked concerned. "Hey, are you all right?" he asks. Mike had a sweet smile and was the first friendly face I'd seen since leaving home. And unless you've been in that position yourself, you don't know what a relief it was to hear a kind voice. So please don't judge me. Anyhow, I explained that I wanted to find work in New York and had reckoned on staying a few nights in the hostel. I lied about my age and told him that I was 19. Of course, I didn't tell him I'd run away from home. I lied and told him I had no family. "Right, now, you look like you need something to eat," he said, and I must admit that I was kind of hungry. He offered to take me to a cafe, and although I half protested, I didn't need much persuasion. There, he bought me coffee and a sandwich while telling me a little about himself. He's originally from Brooklyn and has a business based in New York. He was a bit hazy about what kind of business, and when I asked, he told me that it was an entertainment business. "So, what are your plans now?" he asked me. I pulled a face and told him that I might as well go home, that perhaps I've made a mistake coming here after all. For a moment, he scratches his head and frowns. "Well, I'm not sure, but maybe I can put you up for a few nights," he added. "Don't worry, I live with my wife, so you won't be with me alone." I told him that I don't have much money, but he laughed and told me not to worry, that we can come to some arrangement once I get a job. He goes on to say that he might even be able to get me a job. I must have looked serious for a moment, thinking about the implications. He giggled and told me, again, not to worry, because he has lots of friends and that soon I'll be enjoying my life in New York. I laughed too, thinking of my old friends and wishing they could see me now on my big adventure. Mike made me feel at ease straight away. Looking back, I know it sounds stupid, but I didn't even hesitate to go with him. He had a car just around the corner, and although the place wasn't far away, he said it would be easier going by car than lugging my rucksack about. Alarm bells only started ringing when we seemed to get further and further out of town. I wanted to ask Mike about where we were going exactly, but for some reason, I didn't feel as confident then since we became alone in the car together. Eventually, we stopped outside a big old house, rather shabby looking from the outside. Mike must have seen my face fall, for once again, he flashed me his smile. "It doesn't look like much from the outside, but don't worry," he said. "It looks better on the inside. We still have lots to do to the house." What he was saying made sense to me, and without a further thought, I followed him inside. I don't know why, but when the main door bangs shut behind us and Mike locked the door, I felt a little shudder pass through me. I must have looked panicky because he laughed and touched my arm and told me not to worry. It's New York and people have to keep their doors locked. I smiled but didn't feel quite at ease. It's all sterile inside. White walls and doors and a beige, nondescript carpet, the kind of place that has no identifiable features. "Up here," Mike said, pointing up the stairwell. Although by then my heart was thumping, I did as I was told. I felt out of my depth and no longer in control of what was happening. I didn't see or hear anyone else in the building, but Mike unlocked a white door at the top of the stairs and guides me inside. He flicked on a light, and the first thing I noticed was that there was no windows. It was a plain room with the same white, clinical walls. In the middle of the room, there was a single bed and a chest of drawers and a tiny single wardrobe. "I hope this will be okay," Mike added cheerily, but by now, somehow, his cheery smile had taken on a sinister sensation, and all I could do was nodding. "You look like you need a rest. I'll let you unpack and chill for a while. I need to go out, but I'll be back shortly. The bathroom is the second door down. Will you be okay?" I nod, then he left. I heard him go downstairs and out of the front door, locked it as he was leaving. I pull out my cell phone. I have 3 missed calls and a text from my mom asking where I am. I have never wanted my family so badly in all my life. I quickly dialed Mom's number, but the signal was weak, and after a few crackly rings, the phone cuts out. I started to panic. I'm locked in a stranger's house by a man I barely knew. My room had no visible means of escape, and I had a sinking feeling that I'm the only one here. I raced to the bathroom. It was clean and functional, but again, with no window. There were 2 further doors upstairs. I tried to open them, but they're both locked. I started crying as I rushed down the stairs and tried the main door. Of course, it's locked. I tried the other internal doors, but they were also locked. I could hardly breathe. I was getting so worked up that I started to panic. I must have thought of a plan for when he returned, but what? I went back to my room and tried my phone again, but by then, the faint signal had vanished. If only I could go back 24 hours, I would be safe at home. I would have done anything to be back with my mom and brother. I sat on the bed, trying to think about how to escape when I heard his car returning. This is it, I thought to myself. This is where it all ends. I will finish up being on the front of every newspaper, one of those unfortunate girls found in a shallow grave somewhere. I was in such a frenzy at that point that I thought I would faint. I heard his key in the lock, the door opening, and the creak on the stairs as he approaches. I watch as the doorknob turns, and he stands there, flashing me his sinister smile. In his hands, he holds a large bag, probably filled with the tools for my death. I can bear it no longer and rush at him, screaming, "Please let me go! Please let me go!" He holds me tight to stop me from struggling. "Hey, what's all this about? What's the matter?" he asks. I was so terrified that I could hardly talk, and struggled from his grip and backed away onto the bed like a frightened kitten. It's then that I hear the door open downstairs, and a female voice shouts up, "You home, Mike?" I'm so relieved to hear another voice. Shortly after, a friendly young woman pops her head around the door. "Hi, I'm Jane, Mike's wife. You must be Shona. Mike phoned to say that you would be staying for a few days. Now what on earth is wrong?" Jane looks from me to Mike and back again. Mike shrugs. "I don't know," he said. "I just went to get Shona here a few personal items to make her feel at home, and when I got back, she started crying." Jane brought the bag over and sat next to me on the bed. What I had imagined would be evil instruments of my demise were, actually, a toothbrush, deodorant, and even a bubble bath. It's then that I started crying all over again, mainly with relief and feeling such a fool. It's then that I tell Jane and Mike the truth, that I'm only 17 and have run away from home, and that I want to go back. I don't tell Mike that I thought he was a serial killer. He was genuinely just being a kind man.